Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing great. How are you, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
Gorgeous autumn day out there today. Too bad
Yeah.
Chris down in Florida can't see it. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, here in New England, leaves are turning. It's starting to get a little cold. We're definitely into the heart of autumn and starting to have winter frost.
Well, don't stay stuck here.
Today we've got a special guest with us. We have Chris Calandra of Elliott Wealth Financial. Chris is also the host of the Simply Financial podcast here on the Xvadio Podcast Network. And he's also a co-host on Carnivore Radio. So, Chris, great to have you here.
Thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. I appreciate you and Chip having me on.
It's our pleasure. And, this is not the first time Chris has been on this podcast, but it's been quite a while. So we're happy to have you back.
For sure. And it's such a small world story, right? Because I haven't seen you in a while, Eric. And then at a charity event on Thursday, right on the eve of you and I recording this, we ran into each other at the charity event. So small world.
Yes, absolutely. So today we're going to talk about financial literacy. And a lack of financial literacy seems to be a major problem with people. They don't understand what they're doing with their money. So tell us a little bit about why people need to be financial literate and some of the problems that you've seen from people that aren't.
Yes, it's a shame because money is so very important. Is it the most important thing? No. Your health, your family, loved ones. There are things that are of a higher priority than money. But money is a central issue. And if you ignore it and don't honor some of the basic rules of money and money management, you're likely to be taken advantage of and not win with money. Most of your listeners, most of the people we know, most Americans work incredibly hard for their money. And if they work hard for their money, Eric and Chip, but then they are not good stewards of it and they're taken advantage of, or they make mistakes because they're just not familiar with some of the important concepts, they're not likely to be successful and not likely to build wealth. And that's a really sad turn of events when I see that in the marketplace.
Right. I actually wrote an article a while back about people that were taking away the wrong lesson from something that was out in the public. And there was a statistic that was getting a lot of play in the press, was that the vast majority of Americans are not invested in the stock market. And the lesson that people were taking from this was, oh, the stock market is only for rich people. And I was stressing that, no, that's the wrong lesson. The stock market is how these people are making money. And especially now, we can all really take advantage of that. So what are some of the misconceptions that you've seen in your business?
Well, I think there's several, and I probably could drone on. I'll give you one that's very topical today. You have this student loan debt crisis, and you have $1.5 trillion in student loan debt. It really is a catastrophe for many young Americans. And the reality is a lot of the parents, and especially the children that are taking out these loans, they are very ignorant. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. They just don't know how it works. And they're signing up for these loans that in some cases are $25, $50, $100,000 or more. And they're not aware that in many instances it accrues interest while they're in school. And many Americans don't realize the debt service payments that they're going to be confronted with when they graduate. And still, a lot of young people, when they graduate, they're unfamiliar about the loans and how it works and how interest compounds. And if you just make the minimum payment, or if you go on wage based or salary based payments, you could be making payments, but the payments are not even enough to cover the interest, Eric, so that then the principal is growing, and it is putting young Americans in a huge bind because they have all of this debt service, and far too often they went into it without really knowing what they were signing up for. And sometimes the parents also don't know. And I think that's a very good example of people ending up not winning with money because they take on student loan debt, not realizing the impact that it's going to have once they graduate from college. Is that a good example?
It's a very good example. In fact, Warren Buffett once said the most important lesson that he ever learned was how compound interest works. And unfortunately, so many people don't really understand it.
Yes. And I'll give another example on, say, the flip side of that is that, especially at young ages, but even in the middle ages and older, is that by saving and investing money consistently, even if it's nominal amounts of money, over the course of time, using what you had said about Warren Buffett, and there's the a famous quote from Albert Einstein that said, "Compound interest is the most powerful force in the world." I probably screwed that up. That might not be a quote. I might be liberally paraphrasing. But the idea is, if let's say you saved $100 a month, beginning at say age 21, and you did that for 45 years. And let's say, just for argument's sake, for simple math, you can get a 10% rate of return. So for 45 years, so that's 540 months, you get a 10% rate of return each year, and you do the $100 a month. Would you like to guess? You'll probably be pretty good at this. How much that would accumulate to by the time you were 66 years old? You would be a millionaire.
Yeah, that's the way it works. People don't seem to understand that when you have compound interest, you're making money on the money that you're making. You're not just getting that interest on the initial deposit, you're getting interest on the interest. Conversely, it works the same way with debt. You're paying interest on the interest of what you borrowed.
That's exactly right. So for a young individual, and it ties into the student loan debt, which is it's delaying many young Americans from saving, investing, buying a home, getting married, having children. It's pushing out the age that the previous generations had done some of these things. But $100 a month, beginning at 21, it would grow to $1.04 million at age 66. And the thing is, that's $25 a week. Now, not everybody can do that. There's been times, especially early on in my career, where $100 a month was meaningful and impactful. But I would submit to you guys that most people, most of the time, would be able to set aside $25 a week. You go out to lunch, you get Starbucks, you have a happy hour drink on Fridays, you eat out lunch instead of taking it. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done in most instances, not all, where if you were committed to it, you could put away $25 a week, $25 a week, and you would not really lose out on enjoying your life and also living for now while preparing for the future. And Eric, just to take it a step forward, in today's world, the retirement vehicle of choice is the 401k, and many employers match 401k contributions. And this math illustration we just did gets improved dramatically if you work for a company that does any sort of employer contribution, a match, because then the employer is putting money in on top of your $100. So let's say, just for argument's sake, it's a 50-cent match. Well, then that $25 a week for 45 years, $100 a month, then that would grow to like $1.6 million if you got a 50% match. And I don't think a lot of people realize how compound interest works. So between the student loans and not realizing the power of saving money consistently over time, those are two really important examples of ignorance. Not knowing how money works prevents people from winning with money and building wealth fast enough.
Yeah, I think though also obviously the way money works is one thing, but starting with a plan, a financial plan to really cover what your goals are in life and in school and so on and so forth is so important. I mean, Eric and I have talked about this in many different ways on this podcast over the last few years. So obviously, in doing what you're doing, you sit down with the people and figure out, okay, what's the plan for retirement, this, that, and whatever. What are the things that you like to do? We have to take a look at all the different parts of your life. We call it personal strategic planning on this, but it includes goal setting for the different things that you want to do, and obviously money facilitates doing all those different things. So you have to take your earnings, you have to have your investment strategy like you're talking about. You talked about spending, paying yourself first is really, really important. Borrowing money, credit cards, protecting that, obviously with identity theft out there. So how do you work with your clients up front to really educate them in the first place? And how well do you think the school system is doing this with the kids in college who are the ones who are accruing all of this debt?
Yes, Chip, you brought up so many good points. Let me unpack a couple, and I'll pick on the education system. My oldest is in college. If colleges did, if private businesses did what colleges do, there would be congressional hearings tomorrow. There's a lot of bad behavior, I believe, in the tuition system, the awards kind of thing. To give you an example, Chip, my daughter's a sophomore now, and she got something on her school site, and all schools do this. I'm not just picking on my daughter's school. And it said, well, you got a financial aid award. So I don't know about you, financial aid award, that sounds pretty good, right? But
Yeah.
actually, it was the ability to borrow money. And I'm not saying borrowing money is automatically bad, but if you're not familiar, that terminology is not what I would use. If I say, hey, Chip, I gave you an award, I'm going to lend you $10,000. Well, you've been around enough, you would realize that's not really the right word to use to describe that, Chris. That's a loan. Fair?
Yep.
And I love that you talked about, Chip, planning. I'm a certified financial planner. So at Elliott Wealth Management, I'm a big believer in working with clients to develop a wealth building plan. So, just simply put, it doesn't have to be the most complex thing. You don't need to become a certified financial planner like I am. But to have a plan to figure that you have X number of dollars of income and to figure out of that income, how much could you put towards building wealth? I'm going to define that in a moment. Clearly, you want to spend money, you have expenses, you want to enjoy your life, and so a certain amount of money is going to go for now. But to take a portion of it, you mentioned pay yourself first, is to come up with an amount of money that you're going to use from your income to build wealth. And I use that instead of invest first or even, other terms that are out there, because develop wealth is pretty broad. Included in that is if you have debt like student loans or credit cards, those are impediments to building wealth. So you could take some of that and your wealth building plan and pay down debt. Because if you pay down debt,